Have you not had a week? Our world has had a week. And it's interesting, I've told you before, we plan these sermon series out like months in advance. And it's interesting how God uses events and allows things to happen that just line up perfectly with what I'm going to be preaching on. And today, the one thing I want to talk about when we ask the question, what's holding you back, is I think probably one of the primary ones that holds many of us back. And it's fear. And this week, maybe you felt some fear. You felt maybe some fear personally. Maybe you felt some fear of what's happening in our world. What does this world come to? And maybe that's where you're at today. Maybe you even have found yourself standing on the edge of something big, like a new job or promotion or relationship. Maybe it's a calling from God. It's something that you know that God's called you to. And you just, for whatever reason, you just have this thing holding you back. And you just don't know what life is going to be like if you do that. If you take that plunge, if you take that jump, if you step off that ledge, what is it going to be like? And the thing that's holding you back is fear. And so I want to show you out of the two chapters 3 and 4, it's not the first two chapters, it would be chapter 1 and 2, wouldn't it? Chapters 3 and 4 of Exodus, I want to show us the story of Moses. Now, this is Moses in his adult life, toward the end of his life. But I want to show you when God comes to him and has a calling that he's placed on his life, he has 5 fears that he presents to God in Exodus 3 and 4. Now, we're not going to read both chapters because we would be here too late. And some of y'all, you've got crock pot meals on. I understand for sure some of you do. And so I don't want them to burn. I don't want your roast to burn. We will go back and look at several different parts of it, but I want to read at least the first part of chapter 3, and then we're going to hit highlights of chapters 3 and 4. So read with me, starting in verse 1. Meanwhile, Moses was shepherding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire within a bush, and as Moses looked, he saw that the bush was on fire but was not consumed. So Moses thought, I must go over and look at this remarkable sight. Why isn't the bush burning up? And when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, he answered. Do not come closer, he said. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. And then he continued, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Now, a couple of things I need to say before we jump into the 5 fears that Moses is going to give us here in Exodus 3 and 4. That I think many of these fears, at least 1 or 2 of them, we all deal with at times. There is a difference between being afraid and being fearful. In other words, you should be afraid to go play in Highway 35 when church is over. You should be afraid to pull out in front of an 18-wheeler that's going 70 miles an hour down the road. That's a God-given emotion to you that keeps you safe. But then there's another thing that's called fear, and that is a life-altering, life-controlling, if we allow it to be, thing that's not good for us. And so it says Moses is afraid to look at God, and he would be rightfully so. If you remember, there was another time Moses said, hey, God, I want to see you. And God said, no, you don't. He said, no, you don't, because if you saw me, you would die. So here's what I'm going to do, Moses. I'm going to go hide you behind this rock, and I'm going to pass by, and my glory is going to be all that you see. And he does that. He does that for Moses. And so Moses is afraid, but then God gives him an assignment. What is the assignment that God gives him? The assignment that God's going to give him is, hey, I need you to go down to Egypt, that place that you fled 40 years ago. I need you to go down there, and I need you to tell the Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, I need you to tell him, let my people go. Because my people are in slavery in Egypt, and I need you, Moses, to go. So God brings this burning bush that's on fire, but it's not being consumed. to Moses' attention as he's out shepherding his father-in-law's flock. And the whole point of the burning bush was to get Moses' attention so that he would come over. And when he came over, God starts this conversation. And there is a back and forth between Moses and God in the rest of chapters 3 and chapter 4. And so God says, hey, I want you to go down, and I want you to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Now, it seems on our behalf something that is fairly easy. Like, why didn't he just do it? Like, you might be sitting there thinking, well, I mean, I don't know. Like, if God came to me in a burning bush that wasn't being consumed, but it was on fire, I'd probably do whatever God told me to do. And maybe some of you, you're like, yeah, if God did that. But Moses didn't do it. In fact, what does he say? The very first thing that Moses says is the first fear. It's found in verse 11 of chapter 3. It's the fear of insignificance. The fear that says, who am I? Look what he says in verse 11 of chapter 3. But Moses asked God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? See, Moses has doubts about himself, about his abilities, and he essentially is saying, God, why me? And many of us at times, we have come to stuff and God has asked us to do stuff and we have said, God, why me? Like, why are you asking me? And Moses says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? By the way, just a little backstory in case you're not familiar, Moses was born in Egypt, and at the time, the Pharaoh had said any male children that were born were to be killed because he was afraid that the Israelites were going to rise up because they were having so many babies, and he said, hey, let the female children live, let the male children just kill them. He told all the midwives, kill them. Well, Moses was born and put in a basket in the Nile River, found by Pharaoh's daughter. He becomes part of Pharaoh's family. Now, it's a different Pharaoh at this time. So you're thinking, well, that should be easy to go back to stepdad and tell. No, it's a different Pharaoh at the time. And so he is part of and grows up in the palace of Pharaoh because he is essentially the adopted grandchild of the Pharaoh. But Moses goes out at about 40 years old. He goes out and he kills a dude. He sees an Egyptian, even though he has been raised in the palace, he's still related and connected to his people, the Jews, and he kills an Egyptian because he sees him beating an Israelite slave. So Moses then has to flee. And we find the story 40 years after that incident. So now Moses is 80 years old, and God's coming to him saying, hey, I need you to go to Pharaoh, and I need you to tell him. Now listen, Moses has grown up in a Pharaoh's palace. He knows the immense power that a Pharaoh has. Remember the story of Esther that we've been talking about the last few weeks? The Pharaoh at that time was as powerful as the king of Persia that Esther would have gone to. So Moses says, why me? God, I'm not your guy. Why me? Who am I? Like, I'm just a guy that's been tending sheep in the wilderness. For my father-in-law, I don't even have enough money to have my own flock. I'm tending the flock of my father-in-law, Jethro. And now God is asking him to do something, and fear creeps into his life. And he says, why me? Why am I the one? And God says in verse 12, I will certainly be with you. And this will be the sign to you that I'm the one who sent you. When you bring the people out of Egypt, you will all worship God at this mountain. The very mountain that Moses is standing on is also a mountain that we would know as Mount Sinai. It was the place where they would worship many years later. So here's Moses' objection. God, why me? Who am I that I should do this? Who am I? Listen, by the way, when God calls you to do something, that should be your response. Not that you're not going to do it, but it should be, God, I can't believe that you're using little old me. Like, we should find significance in the fact that God wants to use insignificant people to accomplish his purposes. But it shouldn't be something that holds us back. But I'm telling you, some of you in here, it's holding you back right now. You're like, man, I just don't know, God. Who am I that you would call me to do this? So what do we have to do when that fear creeps into our life? If you're sitting there asking today, God, why me? Who am I that you would call me to do this? Here's what you need to recognize. You need to recognize that God's promise is that he would go with you and he would be with you and he's going to be the one guiding you. Listen, friends, he's not worried about what you can do. He's worried about you knowing your place. So where are you stalled in your life because you're unsure of yourself? But God is saying, this isn't on you, it's about me. Here's the fear number 2. It's the fear, and man, this is one that gets all of us, I think. The fear of inadequate knowledge. Look at verse 13. Then Moses asked God. So first Moses says, hey, who am I? And God says, well, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to go with you. And then Moses asked God, if I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what's his name? What should I tell them? Now, God has already introduced himself to Moses, has he not? He said, I'm the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses has heard about this God. He knows this God. But then when it comes to it, he says, well, if they ask your name, what should I say? What should I say? And God replies to Moses, I am who I am. Now, there is many a debate about what that means and what all that encapsulates. But here's essentially what it means. I'm everything. I'm everything. Like, I have no needs, I have no wants, I am who I am. You just tell them I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. And God also said to Moses, say this to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you, and this is my name forever. And this is how I am to be remembered in every generation. See, Moses is worried that when he gets down to Egypt to talk to the Israelites, he's not going to be able to represent God in the appropriate way. And God says, you don't have to know everything about me. You just tell them I am who I am. You just tell them that I'm the God of their ancestors. You ever felt like you should talk to somebody about Jesus and you worry that they'll have questions that you don't know how to answer? Here's what God's telling you. You don't have to have all the knowledge of me. You just need to share me. And you need to tell some people who I am. And it doesn't matter if you know everything about me, because here's the reality. None of us ever will. If the fear of inadequate knowledge, the fear of not having enough knowledge to share your faith is what you're struggling with, you will always struggle with that, because you will never have all the knowledge of God. We're not meant to. That's just a fear that's holding you back. That's an insecurity in yourself saying, well, I don't have all the answers. You know what? Sometimes people come to me with Bible. Listen, I have 2 degrees in Bible. I have a master's in Bible, and sometimes people come to me and they say, hey, what about this? And I'm like, dude, I'm going to have to get back with you. I don't know, but I will look it up. But what if I just said as your pastor, you know what? Don't ask me any Bible questions, because I may not be able to answer it. You'd be like, what? But that's what we're doing, right? Well, I just don't know. I don't know what question they may ask. And if they ask a hard question, I don't want to look like a fool. Hey, I got news for you. If you're living for Jesus, the Bible tells us that if you're living for Jesus, you look like a fool already. The world says, hey, that's a fool. They're following this guy that claims to come back to life. Listen, our reputations are not nearly as valuable as we think they are. Don't let insignificant knowledge keep you from sharing what Jesus has done for you. Listen, there is nobody in the world that can tell your story like you can tell your story. And if God has rescued you from something, if God has redeemed your life, then you should have a story. And that story should be shared. It doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. You don't have to have any Bible degrees to share your story. You know what? People with Bible degrees can't share your story like you can share your story. You got to share your story. You're called to share your story no matter what knowledge you have or what you don't. And let me just ask us another question. And I'm about to meddle, all right? I've been preaching. Now I'm getting to the meddling stage of the sermon. That's going to bother some of you. If that's the fear that you're going to use for not sharing your faith, then why are you not doing anything about it to learn more about God? See, you can't simultaneously say, well, I don't have enough knowledge, and then you just sit on your laurels and you don't try to learn more about God. Like if you don't have the answers to something and that's what's holding you back, then you should be digging every day to find out all the answers. But so many of us, we say, well, I just don't know. I don't have all the knowledge. And what if they ask a question that I just can't answer? I'm just not going to share with them. And then we just sit there and act like that never happened. So if that's the fear we're going to use, if that's the rationalization we're going to use, then we better be studying. This is why you need to be in the Bible every day. Listen, I know more about the Bible today than I did 10 years ago. Why? It's not because I've just come to church 10 years. Because I've studied the Bible for myself. You can't continue to be spoon-fed. I said this on a video on Facebook. I'm just going to meddle again. Jamie prayed this morning in prayer, God, please keep him from chasing squirrels. I don't know what that means. I don't think I chase squirrels. Maybe I do. But here's the thing. Men, I'm going to challenge you for a second. This world is not getting easier to raise a family and have a legacy of faith like we talked about last week. It's not getting easier. It's getting harder. And so men, what you're going to have to decide to do is you're going to have to decide to rise up to the challenge instead of cowering down in fear. We need more men in New Shores that will take up the mantle of godly leadership in their families. We need you more than ever. Your world needs you more than ever. Listen, what they don't need is political action. What they need is men on their knees and men on their Bibles and men leading their families. That's what our world needs, and that's why our world is going to hell in a handbasket. Because we don't have men who are stepping up. Now, if you don't like that, this might not be the church for you. I'm just saying. Maybe we won't have to go to 2 services after I said that, Les. I'm just giving you the truth. Listen, I've decided, I've just come to this place in my life where if I don't unashamedly tell you the truth without reservation, then I don't feel like I'm doing my job. And it's time for men to stand up. The fear thing is something that we've got to get control of. The fear of inadequate knowledge is something that holds all of us back. God is an unchanging God. He's been the same since the beginning. He will be the same until the end of time. He is a God that wants to get known by us, but you have to put in the work to know him. Here's the third fear. We find it in verses 1 through 9 of chapter 4. It's the fear of rejection. Some of y'all thought y'all were getting off the hook. You don't have the fear of insignificance. You don't have the fear of inadequate knowledge. But some of us deal with the fear of rejection. Look what Moses says in verse 1. It's like he has a comeback. It's like he's a little kid. Has a comeback for everything God says. Well, what if they won't believe me and will not obey me, but say, the Lord did not appear to you? And the Lord asked him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. Throw it on the ground, he said. So Moses threw it on the ground. It became a snake. He ran from it. The Lord told Moses, stretch out your hand and grab it by the tail. Now, how many of y'all would just say, no, I'm out? I'm out. So Moses stretched out his hand. He caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. This will take place, he continued, so that they will believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. In addition, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. So he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, his hand was diseased, resembling snow. Put your hand back inside your cloak, he said. So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, it had become like the rest of his skin. And if they will not believe you and will not respond to the evidence of the first sign, they may believe the evidence of the second sign. And if they don't believe even those 2 signs or listen to what you say, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water you take from the Nile will become blood on the ground. Here's what God is doing. God is saying, hey, they may reject you. They may reject you, but it won't be because they haven't had signs. They may reject you, but I'm gonna equip you. And man, this paralyzes us, doesn't it? We don't want to be rejected. Nobody wants to be rejected. I get that. I understand that. Our human nature, we just want everybody to like us. We want everybody. So I'm not going to stand up for God in the public square because it might cause me trouble. It might cause me issues. I'm not going to go to Pharaoh because, even the Israelites are going to say, God didn't send you. We just can't move forward sometimes because we fear that people are going to reject us. But here's the thing. When you're called by God to do something, the call that you get from God is not a call to results. Let me say that again. When God calls you to do something, He's not like, when God calls you to share your faith with your friend or your family member, He's not calling you to save them because you can't. He's calling you to obey and leave the results up to Him. And at the end of the day, we've got to see that as a rejection. If they reject what we're saying, it's not a rejection of you, it's a rejection of God who wants to save them. Do we understand that? Like, it's not you. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting God. So why are we allowing the fear of rejection to keep us from sharing and doing what God's called us to do? You're not responsible for the results, you're responsible for obedience. So share God, serve Him faithfully, leave the results to Him. I mean, that's what you're called to do. Listen, if you're going to live a faithful life, share God, obey Him, do what He says faithfully, leave the results to Him. I promise you, look at Moses' life. We know the end of the story. Moses in this moment didn't know the end of the story. Pharaoh had his heart hardened by God. Now, that's another sermon that I don't have time to get into. Why would God harden Pharaoh's heart? But He did. The Bible tells us that He hardened God's heart, and it took 10 plagues. It took 10 signs from God for Pharaoh to say, all right, y'all get out of here. And then halfway out, he said, whoa, what have I done? Go get them back. We get to see the end of the story. Moses here didn't see the end of the story. Can I tell you something? You don't get to see the end of the story. That's why we're called just to take a step. Take a step of obedience. Be faithful in your obedience to God. Leave the results to Him. That's all you're called to do. Don't let the fear of rejection keep you from doing important things for God. What if Moses would have just said, you know what, God, just go ahead and kill me? Because there's no way I'm going down to Pharaoh. There's absolutely no way that I'm going down to Pharaoh. I know what you're asking me to do. I know there's a bush here that's on fire that's not consumed. I understand all that. Like, you're doing a miracle in my presence. I understand that, but God, I'm just not doing that. I can't do that. What would have happened? We don't know. I think God would have found a different way, but Moses would not have been the beneficiary of seeing God at work, seeing God do some incredible things. Here's the fourth thing. It's the fear of inability. The fear of inability. Look at Exodus 4, verse 10. But Moses replied to the Lord, please, Lord, I've never been eloquent, either in the past or recently or since you've been speaking to your servant, because my mouth and my tongue are sluggish. Many scholars believe that Moses had a stutter, that he wasn't good at speaking to people. But look what God says to him in verse 11. Who placed a mouth on humans? Who makes a person mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. Maybe this is you. Maybe you say, God, I'm just not eloquent. I don't have this skill or I don't have that skill. And here's what God would tell you. Who gives skills to people? Who puts mouths on humans? Who makes people deaf or blind or able to see or able to hear? Who does that? It's God. So if He can do that, then He can help you along the way. Here's what I also know. God never wanted to rely on your strengths anyway. God doesn't care about your strengths. You know what He cares about? He cares about your weakness. That's why some of y'all are fearful. You're like, I don't know how to do what God's calling me to do. Exactly, that's the point. If you know how to do it, you just go do it. What you got to do is you got to rely on God when He comes to your weakness. Look what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. But He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Man, that goes against the American mindset, doesn't it? The American mindset is you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you just make it happen, you just give it your all, and what God is saying is, hey, I don't want your strength, I want your weakness surrendered to me, because it's not about your ability, it's about the ability I'm going to give you when it's time for me to give it to you. And I'm going to work in your weakness so that I get the glory and you don't. He ends that verse by saying, therefore I will most gladly boast all the more about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may reside in me. When's the last time you boasted in your weaknesses? When's the last time you just said, man, I am so weak, and that's awesome. I'm weak in this area, and that's awesome because God's going to use me in that area. Paul says, listen, God, his power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I am going to gladly boast about my weaknesses. Why? Because that's the area that God's going to shine in my life. That's the area that God wants to use me in. God's not looking at you and me and saying, man, look at all that person has to offer. I think I can use them. God is looking at our weaknesses, and he's saying, if they would just rely on me, I would make something of their life. If they would not think that they have to have all the ability in the world to do this or that, I could use them in a powerful way because I want to work in their weaknesses. I heard this a long time ago. You've heard it too, probably, if you've been in church any amount of time. God never calls the equipped. He equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped. Like, you don't come out of the box ready for God to use you. God has to equip you for the calling he's put on your life. Here's the last fear. Last fear. It's the fear, of surrender. The fear of surrender. Look at verse 13 in Exodus 4. Moses said, please, Lord, send someone else. And then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. And he said, isn't Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well. And also he's on his way now to meet you, and he will rejoice when he sees you. You will speak with him, tell him what to say. I will help both you and him to speak, and will teach you both what to do. And he will speak to the people for you, and he will serve as a mouth for you, and you will serve as a God to him. And take this staff in your hand that you will perform the signs with. See, this last fear is the one that probably grips us more than others. Those other fears are fears that all of us deal with at times. But the fear that grips us more than any is the fear of letting go, the fear of losing control. We got any control freaks in the room? Like, some of you are willing to admit it. The others of y'all, you know you're a control freak, you just won't admit it. All of us want to be in control of our life, do we not? All of us want to know the next steps that we need to take, and we want to see 5 years down the road, and we want to see 10 years down the road, and man, I'm just going to make my steps, and I'm going to make my journey, and here's what God is saying to us today. If you're going to be used by me in a powerful way, you're going to have to surrender. And I'm not talking about surrendering like 99%. Like, you have to surrender everything. Like that old Baptist hymn that we sing. I surrender all. I surrender all. I used to sit in church when we'd sing that, and I'd think, I wonder how many of these people are singing that and they're lying. Like, I think it would be better if it was I surrender some. Or I surrender what I want to, and I'm going to keep whatever else I want for myself. If we surrender to God, we surrender to God. I've used this illustration before. Have you ever heard of a war where the losing army comes to the winning army, says, okay, we surrender, except for over here. And we're going to keep battling over here, but we surrender. Does that happen? No, it's either a full surrender or it's not a surrender at all. The same is true with God. We have to fully surrender to him. But you see there in verse 14 when Moses said, God, can you just please send someone else? Like, can someone else do this? And in verse 14, we find out that the Lord's anger burned against Moses. Now, I'm not sure what that looks like, and I'm not sure I ever want to know what that looks like. For the Lord's anger to burn against me. But at this point, he's taken 4 objections from Moses, and he's been totally fine with coming back and having these conversations. And now we get to the 5th one where Moses is like, God, can you please send someone else? And God has to be sitting there thinking, are you kidding me? Like, I just turned your staff into a snake, and you picked it up by the tail, and it turned back into a staff. I just had you put your hand in your cloak, and it was diseased, and you put it back in, you take it out, and now it's healed. Like, what else do I have to do to show you that I'm going to be with you and I'm going to make it happen. And listen, we can sit there and we can dog Moses all day long. But for some of you, God has showed up over and over and over again in your life. And now he's living there saying, why will they not surrender to me? Why are they saying, can someone else do it? I got news for you. Someone else will do it if you won't. God doesn't need you. God doesn't need me. God chooses to use his people so that they can be rewarded, so that they can have blessing. But it only comes with surrender, and some of us are afraid to surrender. We're afraid to surrender everything. God, I'm going to surrender everything but. And we've got our little side over here that's our world, and we can't surrender. Listen, some of us today, we need to just admit to God, I have not been fully surrendered to you, and today is the day I'm fully surrendered. And can I tell you, life doesn't get easier when you do that. It doesn't become a bed of roses, but rewards come your way. Heavenly rewards start to flow in your life, and you start to see things differently. You start to see things more clearly when you will fully surrender. But some of you are like, I don't see God working in my life. It's because you're not fully surrendered. He can't use you because you're holding back. So where does God want you to surrender today? God ends up sending Moses' brother Aaron with him. And it's interesting that we see in the text that God says, hey, isn't Aaron the Levite your brother? It's as if God didn't know. But why do we find out that Aaron is a Levite? Well, Aaron was a Levite, and the tribe of Levi were the Levites were the ones that were in charge of the temple. They were the ones that were in charge of the worship at the temple. So Aaron would have all of this vast knowledge that maybe Moses tending flocks in the wilderness didn't have. Maybe the knowledge that Moses didn't get when he was at the palace of Pharaoh. But Aaron has the knowledge. And so God now is going to say, hey, if you just fully surrender to me, I'm going to give you someone, your brother, who's a Levite, that's going to go with you and going to help you in this battle. Going to help you in this journey. But what I need you to do is I need you to say yes. I need you to surrender. I need you to put your check, your blank check on the table, your yes on the table, and say, God, I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do. And it's as if, like Moses has seen all these miracles right before him. God, can you send somebody else? Is there anybody else? And I don't know about you, but as I'm reading through this story, I just want to throat punch Moses. Like, are you that dumb? Like burning bush, on fire, not consumed, hand disease, not disease, snake, pick it up, staff. But I've got news for us. I've got news for myself. If I'm going to throat punch Moses over that, I got to throat punch myself. Because if I just open my eyes, I can see God doing miracles all around me. And it might not be a bush on fire that's not consumed. It might not be a staff turning into a snake and then back to a staff. It might not be all that. But if I look around, and if you look around and we open our eyes, we can see that God is doing incredible things all around us in the lives of people around us. And that should be an indication to us that God's just saying, hey, if you just surrender, if you just say yes to me, if you just put your yes on the table, I promise you I will be with you. I will send help. I will equip you. I will give you everything you need to accomplish the task that I have for you. So what is it today that God is asking you to do that you've just been fearful of? Like you say, BJ, if I'm honest today, fear is holding me back. Like fear's holding me back. And I don't want it to hold me back any further. It may be one of the 5 fears I mentioned. Those are quite popular. But maybe it's something else. I want to give you a verse. Before we leave, I want to give you a verse. It's 2 Timothy 1:7. 2 Timothy 1:7. We're going to put it on the screen for you. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and sound judgment. Can I tell you today that the spirit of fear that's keeping you from doing what God wants you to do is not a spirit from God. It's a spirit from the enemy. And some of us today, we just need to be resolved before we walk out those double glass doors that we're going to get rid of the spirit of fear in our life. That we're going to leave it here. That we're going to let God deal with that. That we're going to let God push that aside. And we're going to move forward in power, love, and a sound mind. I'm not sure. Listen, I can't know. With all these people in there, I can't know what fear you're dealing with. But I know all of us at times deal with fear. And all of us at times, if we're not careful, it can hold us back. So today we're going to have a response time. There will be people that would love to pray with you on either side. Maybe you need to leave your fear here at the altar. Whatever that fear is. Listen, God does not give us fear. Fear is a spirit from the enemy. So some of us today need to walk out victorious saying, we're not going to be fearful anymore. I'm not going to let fear control my life anymore. I'm not going to let fear hold me back anymore. It's held me back for this many years. It's held me back for this many months, and it is over. I'm going to lay it at the feet of Jesus, and I'm going to follow and surrender everything I have to Jesus. Maybe today, the fear that you have is you've never given your life to Christ. And today, you just need to say, hey, I'm done with fear of what that looks like, and I'm going to make that commitment to follow him. Maybe it's the fear of baptism. You'd be surprised how many people are afraid to be dunked in a pool of water. It's as if one of their family members pays me, like I'm going to hold them under and drown them or something. Yeah. Some people are just afraid to get in front of a bunch of people. So what fear is holding you back from being all that God's called you to be? We're going to have a time of response, and it's time for allow God to deal with that in our lives. And throughout this series, we're going to be calling you to really respond and give up what's holding you back, because I want God to really be evident and strong in your life. I want him to use you in a powerful way. I want you to really feel like, man, I have a purpose, and I'm fulfilling that purpose that God has given me. The only way you can do that is to let go of the things that are holding you back. Let's pray.